Thanks, Sam, and welcome to everybody to today's vodcast. As usual, our vodcasts are a series of conversation with our strata experts about how to work with your manager to help you build more effective committees whilst recognising the challenges you face. The focus of our conversations will be around contemporary issues and human factors rather than legal requirements. We've been doing this for a while. We started in 2021 and we have we're up to Series 4, and Series 1, 2, 3 are on our website, and you can find that at www.vic.stratacommunity and click on the Owners Corporation tile and look then for Owners Vodcast. Sam might put the link in just to make that easier. Today, we welcome back one of our regular panel members, David Hamilton. So give us a wave, David, to the conversation. And we have apologies from Catherine, who is still tripping around Europe, and from Nick Abbey, who are not available this month. David is a high-rise lot owner. He happens also to be our EV expert and generally a building expert, having been around how buildings are built, and is also the founder of South Bank 3006, one of the fastest growing residential groups for the South Bank area. Well, today we also have a special guest who's just managed to join us in time, and that is Jane Evans. Give us a wave, Jane. Thank you. Jane has extensive experience in the insurance sector, and for the first time in 14 years, she is unbranded. So while she considers her next adventure. So we thought this was an opportunity to sort of talk a little bit about insurance that was free, if you like, unbranded from any particular company perspective, which is an opportunity. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining today. In this and next month's podcast, we're going to discuss some various insurance matters. Insurance costs, of course, are escalating and usually represents the biggest ticket item on the budget, regardless of size of the scheme. In particular, in this conversation, we are going to look at duties owed to the insurer by the Owners Corporation. There are two parts to disclosure, as I see it from my perspective. The first occurs when something happens during the policy period that might impact the policy, such as works were done and asbestos was discovered, or we discovered rubber wiring we didn't know was there before. Maybe they've just discarded cladding, which would be surprising. A building notice may have been issued by council, or there may have been legal action served on the Owners Corporation. These are all things that occur during a policy period and would need to be disclosed to the insurer. But the other one, the one that we really want to focus today on, is the one that occurs at the time of renewal, and where the duty of disclosure under the Insurance Contract Act 1984 has changed to one from not of disclosure, but one of not to misrepresent. And so the insurer will now ask a list of specific questions to be answered by the Owners Corporation. So there's been a bit of a shift with respect, and Jane's going to sort of help us understand the why. Many of our strata managers know there is a duty of disclosure because that's been drummed into them over many, many years. However, I have heard stories from our managers seeking advice about what do we do if the committee instructs us not to disclose something, and that they are true stories. So Jane, first question to you. What does the duty to disclose or not misrepresent mean? And in your experience, is the requirement the same across all insurers or underwriters? A generic thing, or is it something we're seeing only particular people introduce?
Thank you, Julie. Look, the duty of disclosure was something that I think most people had heard of for many, many years. And the duty of disclosure, the trouble with it was that if anyone has a policy wording, whether it's strata, whether it's your car or home insurance or anything else, the duty of disclosure used to say the insured or the policyholder had an obligation to insure anything that the insurers may need to know in order to insure you. And of course, it's up to us as policyholders to understand, well, what do they need to know? I didn't know such and such was relevant. So with the awareness after the Hayne Royal Commission in 2020 and 2021, or 2020 it was, they then said, look, we need to make this fairer for policy owners so that they're not caught out. So it's now the Insurance Contracts Act has now changed. They've retired the duty to disclose, and they've now put in the duty to not misrepresent. Now, I think everyone on this call would understand what misrepresentation means. So what they're saying is that if we ask you direct questions, for example, does the building have cladding? Then you must answer yes or no. Can you tell us, how many lots are in the building? Then you answer. It's just, but what this will mean is that they will probably ask more questions, and they will ask, there'll probably be more questions, and they might be open-ended questions, wanting you to respond to those in an open, transparent manner.
So does not to my knowledge count? Is that a response? I mean, I know it's not an available response. It's not a box you can tick.
No, it's not a box you can tick. And look, some years ago in strata, when it was a much smaller industry, before we probably had problems with building defects, or of the magnitude that we see now, people used to get away with, I don't know, unknown. The strata underwriters started saying we won't accept unknown. They were accepting, something like not to my knowledge, which for me sounds the same, but they are now sort of, if it's something that they really need to know in order to really understand the risk, because the whole idea of insurance, if you think way back, what is insurance? Its absolute foundations is relying on someone telling them what they want to be insured. Okay, so I want to insure a car. Okay, what make and model is it? Blah, blah, blah. What year is it? What color is it? That sort of thing. So if you're talking about strata, what do you want us to insure? So you have to really be ready to disclose. If there's anything, one thing that tripped me up a few years back was car stackers. And even though I had been in the insurance industry for many, many years, I wasn't aware initially, until I was made aware, that car stackers were a higher risk. So I wasn't asking the question, or I was being told it and I wasn't reporting it to the insurer. And then when it became apparent, I went, oh, okay. They then apply a different excess to car stackers. So, this is what I'm saying. You don't know what you don't know, but to your best of your ability, you must not misrepresent knowingly.
Right. So who is exposed if there is a failure of this disclosure, like the questions were answered incorrectly, or in the case of the other type of disclosure, meaning somewhere when the policies afoot, where they didn't tell the insurer, for example, that a building notice was received and something happened. What's sort of the flow-on effect, if you like? Okay,
so I think they really do come back to the intent. Okay, and what is reasonable. So if and sometimes this becomes apparent when a building or is going out and possibly shopping around for a new manager. Okay, and they might go to a few different brokers, and one broker might have one lot of information and another broker might have another lot of information. And when the insurers are there going, we're just being told different things. One person is telling us they've had no claims. The other person is telling us that they've actually, there's a claim in force, or there's a claim about to happen. So when that happens, they'll go back to say, look, you better go back and check your information, because I'm not too sure, whether all the information you have is correct, because we might have old records as well, because there's only a finite number of insurers. Therefore, whose onus is, if there is a evidence that there's been deliberate misleading, okay, then obviously that would be considered fraudulent. If it has been, look, it was overlooked and whatever, they're very reasonable. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And David, just jumping across to you now as a person on the committee, the insurance renewal has come up. and that questionnaire now lands at the committee meeting to say, here's the renewal questionnaire. What does the committee then do with those questions? Does it feel comfortable enough to be able to answer those questions, or does it need to seek further advice from elsewhere, or how do you tackle that? How does your committee tackle it?
Well, my committee has one person who takes responsibility for managing the relationship with the insurer and collating information and keeping a documentary history of events in the building, as well as we obtain annually an updated replacement cost assessment on the building. So we have a quantity surveyor assessing the position of the value of the building to replace. But in terms of issues that come up, we maintain a register of things which have occurred in the building and or modifications that have been made to the building. Now, to go, say, to one of the points that Jane was touching on, we received a building order at one stage with respect to ACP. We went through, we immediately notified the broker, who notified the insurer. We then went through a whole process of assessment of what the risk was. When it finally turned out there was minimal risk, the order was lifted, and we again then went through the comparable process of advising everybody, so that the insurer, when it comes to the renewal the next time, can factor that into their thinking, or the underwriter can factor that into. So we've taken that approach on, and as opposed to a group of people sitting around a table, but that person circulates the material to everybody on the committee before it is submitted to the insurer. So collectively we know what is going through, and thus it is a collective and conscious decision as to what is being put before the insurer. So others can at that stage say, hey, but what about we haven't identified this issue. So that's how we try to create a sort of a circle of information which should assist the broker and the underwriter, and separately train other experts to assist in the process of the material. We get a risk manager to prepare a report second year on the whole building to go to the broker and the underwriter. So, the idea being that there's an open book, and everybody can work with as good as information set as possible.
That's
wow,
great.
that's amazing.
That's really good, David. That's gold standard, mate.
I agree. I'm very interested. Who is this person on your committee? and do they then have, within that role, are they then basically coordinating then with the build, because you would have a building manager who's managing the asset in this there, and you've got a strata manager sitting over there who's, like, say, receiving the building notices, etc. So is that committee member then really getting their feed or their information for their own register from these people and builds up?
Yes, and including all the ESM audits. All of that material we supply to the broker, so that there is no uncertainty about what they are insuring. That they cannot come back and say, "Oh, but we didn't know." That's the target that we're having. So probably we're assisted by the fact that person was a lawyer, so they have a perspective on due diligence and disclosure. So we've been very lucky there. sort of,
So Jane, over,
yeah,
sorry, David, Jane, just over to you. You're now the broker for David. And so what does that mean to you as a broker in getting that kind of, as you say, gold standard, but that quality of information? How does that help you at your end, and how does that secure the best price, if you like? Because the broker's role is to then go to the market to find out the best possible price. So how does having that information help in doing that?
Well, firstly, I must say, from knowing that, you know, if I was managing David's building, knowing that that's the way they normally operate, firstly, that gives me comfort. And also that if anything did happen to slip through, you would have a record of, you know, this is not someone trying to misrepresent, this is just an oversight. So it puts you in a much stronger position because of the way you operate. You know, it's sort of like, we know what we're dealing with. So that's a really important thing to know. There are sometimes come across scenarios where people, you know, they are reluctant to disclose because they are fearful of what the impact could be on the policy. And we say, look, if you can tell us, it's far better to tell us up front in good time so that a broker can then know what they're dealing with. And we're in a much, well, brokers, I say, we are no longer broking, but we would then be in a much stronger position to go forward with the insurers and say to them, you know, present you well. You know, I often, when I was broking, used to use the expression that, you know, help us to tell the story. So even if there was something that looked like it wasn't too good, you know, maybe there was something that had to be disclosed that might impact the premium in a negative way, I would at least be able to go forward and say, yes, but this building is really well maintained, and the fact that the Owners Corporation Committee has so many people that are focused on collecting information, and their records are really, really good, we would like you to consider this favourably. So it's underwriting and it is not always a cut and dried thing. There are some things they have to do, but it just helps us manage a process much better and try and get the best outcome.
Okay. Now I am going to change the questioning slightly in 1 second, but just before we leave that topic, Jane, otherwise, in your experience, how does the insurer use these third-party reports that the OC might get? For example, if the OC had got a building condition report, for example, and it showed, or a safety report, or the cladding report, or it's got, you know, whatever, any of these reports that have come in that are showing that the Owners Corporation in due diligence is, you know, working through problems or doing that. How does the insurer, I mean, is the insurer looking at this and going, this is a really good OC, they're acting within the Act, they're doing their due diligence, let's reward them by giving them a good premium? Or are they just totally ignoring it still?
I would say
previously they weren't, but
yeah, look,
has anything changed?
Yeah, look, I would say that actually in the olden days, they probably would have looked at that really favourably. As the costs of claims and become apparent, the cost of materials, there are some, you know, the expectations, those laws, the actuarial kind of requirements are probably a little bit tighter. So there's probably some ways that the insurer would be able to, I believe the insurer would still say, look, this is a well-run building, and this report is showing negatively. The first thing they're going to say is, what are you doing about it? And if you can show us a timeline, if it's, I did have one some years ago where the committee was, they kept, every time we would revisit it, they'd say, oh, we're getting more quotes. They kept going back for more quotes and more quotes and more quotes. And we said, well, while you're doing that, your buildings continuing to deteriorate. So at some point you have to make the decision to start work or show the insurer. You can't just say we're getting more quotes. At some point you have to say, right, we have a plan in place and we're going to start in October or whatever. And then the insurer will put possibly excesses or special conditions on that and we will revisit that in October, and they will expect to have updates. And if, let's just say, the renewal was due in, let's just say, January, and works hadn't started in October, then they would say, well, you haven't really kept up your end, so we are going to have to either not offer renewal or only offer you, a very limited cover. So they're just wanting to see the lot owners taking responsibility and moving something forward.
Yes, I agree. And there are a few buildings facing no renewal.
Yes.
So it's real, it's happening.
It is real.
David, across to you, shift change. As a lot owner, you also require additional insurance for contents. And if you are a landlord, you potentially should also or may have landlord's insurance. What is your experience when you go to get a contents policy for a high-rise building?
As an individual, you're asking me?
Yes,
well,
correct.
So I find it quite interesting that the algorithms that are used by the domestic insurance community, as opposed to the high-rise strata limited group of insurers, have very little understanding about how high-rise buildings are constructed. And I can sit at 30 meters above street level in a building which has got a glass facade, and the algorithm wants to know what are the walls made of, and it doesn't have glass as an option. And it wants to know what the roof is made of, and it doesn't, and it can't cope with a concrete slab. So the algorithms struggle, right? And you end up either having to talk to somebody. That's the first part of it. The second is they've got no understanding about the security systems that are in a high-rise strata building, and want to have deadlocks on the windows. Well, the fact that the windows can't open more than 140 mils, and the fact that you're 30 to 60 meters above the ground, and there are video cameras everywhere, and you can have deadlocks on the front doors, but there is no security system in the apartment. Oh, well, that's a markdown in the algorithm. So I think it raises an amount of frustration for people that on the content side of insurance. That's and of course the ultimate one is you're in a high flood risk area. You talk to an insurance person and say, well, if I've got flood water coming into my apartment, you've got bigger problems.
On the 34th floor.
Yeah.
Most of any building you've got in Melbourne is currently underwater.
Yes, exactly.
Houston,
so,
you've got a problem.
Yes, exactly. So, Jane, is there anything in hearing that side, is there anything from, I'll call it structurally, the owners corporation policy per se, that could be produced that would help a lot owner to give to their contents insurer? Because it's not normal for the strata insurers to also offer landlords and contents. I know there are some who play in the area, but holistically it's not a done thing, and yet you'd kind of think there'd be some synergy there, and even perhaps some incentive or reward from an insurer if they were doing both within the market. But is there anything that can be done to ease that problem, like a statement, in other words, or the PDS? Or
okay, there's a couple of things. What I did, David, I was aware of your question, so I did a little bit of research on the weekend, and I went onto the internet. I searched a couple of just random home contents insurers to see how their algorithms were working. Some of them, I think, are rushing you to a price, and then if you accept the price, they'll then ask further questions before they bind. That's for the online purchases. I think that was RACV was the one I went to. And that didn't ask me any questions at all about security. So I'm thinking that if I had have proceeded and bound, it probably would have said before we continue, and they would have asked questions. The thing that I learned in the many 25 years or whatever of insurance and doing domestic things as well is that the key word is accessible. And you may have, and for anyone else in this situation, be very careful with the first or second questions that you're asking at the start, because you might be pushing them down a way, you know, like a path of questions that you don't want to go to. So, accessible, what we're talking about when we say accessible is I would not expect windows on the 15th floor to be accessible. I would, and I live in a low-rise owners corporation. Now I have a keypad entry, so I'm inserting that into any security things, and I have a balcony which you can walk out on, but it's not accessible because there are no, for example, trees outside. If you look at your apartment from the perception of someone trying to break in, trying to get in from outside, you know, if you have a balcony and there's a lovely big elm tree and someone can climb that up there and swing across, then your balcony is accessible, okay? And so you need to go, all right, well, if someone did break in, we'd probably need some patio bolts and the like. I think that most of the insurers, the ones that I played around with, seem to ask questions, and a lot of them will say, you know, is it, if you're asking for contents only, they are starting to learn that might mean that you may be in an apartment. If you're asking for building and contents, that's where they'll assume that it's a freestanding block. So with your contents, just check that you've answered things correctly at the start. And most of the insurers seem to be understanding. They might say, is your apartment in a strata, or they might say, is your home above 3 stories? I think my insurer says, is your home on the 3rd or above? And I've said yes. So, you know, that sort of thing. So they will ask you those sort of questions. But then if you're not too sure about what to put as external, then you could go back to your strata policy, because most times now the brokers or the insurers are disclosing that when they send you the renewal, and of course it doesn't change. So if you don't have this year's renewal, you'll have last year's one. Sorry about my dog. You'll have last year's thing, and it should say that it's brick, concrete, you know, steel, glass. What they're looking for is something that isn't flammable, okay? And when you are contents, they're not really looking for your external walls for contents generally. They're you know, not in an apartment, of course. And the roof, you would generally say, if they are asking for roof, even though you might be, your ceiling might be concrete, they'd be looking for flat roof, you know, concrete, tilt slab concrete, regardless of what's inside your apartment. Does that help?
Yep. I think that will help a lot of people.
Yeah.
This is a common theme that comes through.
I know. And so that's why I went on to try and see, and I might have to do some more research. I
did somehow. I think there is more in this conversation, but of course we've run out of time. So I think we'll pick up in a future podcast. We will ask Jane to join us again, and I think there's a lot of value in having an insurance person, an expert insurer, on our conversation, so we might co-opt her more permanently as well. But I'm also aware, just in the claims area, when we talk about the lot owners now and getting context, etc., that there's a tension between what is covered then under contents and landlords versus what's in the strata policy, and the you know, the other policies are saying to the strata, you know, you give me you tell me what parts are excluded and why, kind of thing. And I think that's something really worth exploring too. So we've run out of time. again, I want to thank Jane for your fabulous contribution. It was great for you to join us today.
Thank you.
David, as usual, wonderful insight. You get a gold star and 10 out of 10 for your insurance renewal process. We all strive to get to that level.
Absolutely.
And I see Andrea's on the call, so we're going to put that into best practice, Andrea. She'll contact you later, David, to get the details. So we are, from us, thank you to everyone, and we will, of course, see you on the 2nd of August. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks very much, Julie. Thank you, Jane, David, for joining us. This recording will be emailed to everybody who registered, and I've also put in the chat box the links to a couple of upcoming events, SCA Strata Sustainability event, and also for the next vodcast. Other than that, I wish everybody a great weekend. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.